At the Museum of Far Eastern Antiquities in Stockholm, there's a collection of Stone Age objects unlike any other in the world. These objects come from the prehistoric agricultural peoples that lived along the Yellow River in China. The man who found them was Swedish. His name was ChinaGunnar Andersson, but he was known as ChinaGunnar in Sweden. He's also famous in China because of his instrumental role in developing the country's archaeology, geology, and mining industries. So who was this man they called ChinaGunnar? Well, he was born in Knista in the province of Närke in 1874. His parents were farmers, and his interest in the earth and minerals was apparent from an early age. He moved to Uppsala to study geology and paleontology. His studies and his research required him to participate in scientific expeditions to various parts of the world. In 1901, he joined the first Swedish expedition to Antarctica. During the journey, Andersson and a couple of his fellow explorers were separated from the rest of the group. They had to spend the winter in a stone hut on a desert island, where they survived on a diet of penguins. When they were eventually reunited with the expedition, the rest of the crew could hardly recognize them. At first, several of them believed that Andersson and his colleagues were members of some previously unknown Aboriginal population. After his return to Sweden, Andersson became a professor of geology. He began working on locating iron ore deposits all over the world, and this attracted great interest in China. In 1914, he was invited to visit China as an official government mining advisor. He arrived in a country that was undergoing political turmoil. The imperial dynasty had been overthrown, and foreign powers were occupying parts of China. The new Chinese power players sought assistance abroad in their efforts to modernize the nation's industries. Andersson traveled around the outskirts of Beijing, studying the area's geology and discovering several new iron ore deposits. This was when Andersson met Ding Wenjiang, who was one of the heads of China's National Geological Survey. Ding became Andersson's boss and friend, and supervised him as he helped train the first generation of Chinese geologists. During an expedition in 1918, Andersson discovered a cave system containing human remains that were eventually determined to be prehistoric. They came from Homo erectus, the famous Peking man. Andersson continued his travels, and sometime later he made what was to be his greatest discovery, the one that would win him his fame and his nickname, ChinaGunnar. This find was made in 1921 by the village of Yangshao, which is close to the Yellow River in central China. There, ChinaGunnar Andersson found graves containing human remains. Painted pottery, stone axes, and other everyday objects were also collected, some of them more than 7,000 years old. In time, this would be considered the first serious archaeological excavation in China, and the finds revealed the country's first farming population. Earlier myths and legends of China's past were called into question. The story grew into a global sensation, and history had to be rewritten. The archaeological work continued in Gansu province of northwest China. Transporting the finds to Beijing for further study proved to be a bit of a challenge. Andersson's expedition was a long way from the nearest road, and they had to carry the objects across the mountains to the Yellow River, and then freight them along the Yellow River to the closest train station. Andersson and his Chinese colleagues agreed that the finds would all be sent to Stockholm for analysis. Half of the objects were to be returned to China afterwards. These were marked with the letter P for Peking. Half of them were to remain in Stockholm, and these were marked with the letter S. This unique collection formed the core of the East Asian collection that was declared a national museum by the Swedish Parliament in 1926. ChinaGunnar Andersson was appointed to be its director. He held this post for more than 10 years, and he also returned to China to further deepen the special cooperation the countries and their researchers enjoyed. A few years after his death, the collection was moved to an old Navy arsenal on the island of Skeppsholmen in Stockholm and renamed the Museum of Far Eastern Antiquities. One of the driving forces behind this move was King Gustav VI of Sweden, who also donated a significant part of his own collection, mostly pottery and porcelain, to the museum. Over the years, the king had been an important collaborator on Andersen's projects and had visited some of the excavations. The Chinese part of this Stone Age collection was kept in a museum in Nanjing, and Andersen saw some of the objects himself in 1937. However, they had been missing since the 1940s. Perhaps they disappeared during the years of Japanese occupation, or during the Civil War that followed. So while the Swedish portion of Andersen's discovery is still on display at the Museum of Far Eastern Antiquities, the whereabouts of the Chinese portion remains a mystery to this day.